trying to shock the world here.
I'm calling for an open tryout. If anyone is watching this, I'm calling for an open tryout. I got a year of eligibility left.
Might have some. Anthony, where is home for you?
Home is Medland.
That's wrong. All right, I hear what you're saying, but I'm just have to disagree.
While we were in class this morning, I was watching his mixtape, and this guy catches and shoots from anywhere.
Are you ready for some debate? Because Bobcat Breakdown starts right now.
Welcome everyone to Bobcat Breakdown. I'm your host, Jack Bergman, joined by analysts Eric Zank and Mike Singer. Do you guys have anything to say before we get into the show tonight?
I'll let you start, Eric. Be my guest.
I'm excited to be here. It's my first time here, and aside from the Devils getting absolutely crushed right now, I'm in a good mood. So let's go.
Eric, from the broadcast booth down to here, I'm ready for a great debate.
Awesome. So we've got an action-packed night for you guys, so let's get right into the debate. This weekend, the men's ice hockey team took the ice for 2 games in Orono, Maine. The men's hockey team got swept, losing 2-1 and 6-5. Both goalies started 1 game apiece. Which goalie should start for the team going forward? Eric, let's start off with you.
Well, I think you're crazy if you don't say Dylan Silverstein. It should be the goalie moving forward. I mean, until he gives a reason not to be. He's only started 1 game this season, but he saved 25 of 27 shots, whereas Marinov, on the other hand, surrendered 6 goals in his start. Ride the hot hand, right? In my opinion, you got to ride the hot hand. Let him start until he gives you a reason not to. He's a first year with a lot to prove, and my feeling, if I were Ram Techno, would be, let's see what he's got.
Eric, just know you have to go with Matvei Marinov. You know why?
I'd love to know why.
Because he is the only goalie with the win. Go with the goalie that's more experienced, especially last year. If you're looking at the VO on your screen right now, you're watching him warm up. You're about to see him make a couple of saves. Last season, he went 11-6-3. He had 1 shutout, and despite his numbers this year being okay, not being up to par where they were last year with a 185, you have to go with the more experienced goaltender, especially when you have a lot of conference play coming your way in at least a couple of weeks.
See, you're crazy, man. I like you, but you're crazy because he's given up 8 goals in 2 games. I understand Silverstein is responsible for 1 loss, and he doesn't have a win yet, but he's played the 1 game, and he gave up 2 goals, and both of those were in the first period. He gets better as the game goes on. He establishes a rhythm the more action he sees. And so, again, I just think until he gives you a reason not to start him, i.e. giving up 6 goals in 1 night, let him ride.
But Marinov was there last year. He got a couple of games, especially when he made 35 saves in that game on Saturday night that went to overtime. Despite it being a 6-5 loss, he's made so many saves. He was the clear backup last year, but he has so much more experience. I don't know why you wouldn't go with the more experienced hand. So let me ask you this. Would you rather go with Jacob Markstrom, or would you rather go with a goalie that hasn't gotten 1 NHL game yet? If you put it like that, the clear answer is Matvei Marinov.
All right, first of all, touchy subject, because it's been a rough night for the New Jersey Devils. But I do see your point there. I understand the reasoning for both goalies, but in my opinion, Silverstein's the way to go.
We got to move on to the next question. I just can't. I can't agree with that at all.
All right, so far this winter, we've seen a lot of new talent on both the men's and women's hockey teams. With 3 new goalies in Hamden, 1 on the men's and 2 on the women's, which goalie has impressed you the most? Mike, you can get us started with this one.
And I said it on the broadcast on QBSN on Friday when they played Syracuse. You have to go with Felicia Frank. You know why? As I called her on the broadcast, she's Miss Perfect. Look at the stats on your screen. 30 saves. Her record is 2-0. And you know what happened in those 2 games? 2 shutouts. 2 shutouts. Give her all the Dunkin' Donuts in the world. Any donut is hers, because that's how much she has won. 2 games, 2 shutouts, Eric.
Suddenly I want Dunkin' Donuts. Your fault. However, what's better than 2 shutouts? 3. Kaylee Doyle. How do you not go with Kaylee Doyle? She's been the best goaltender by far across the Quinnipiac hockey program this season. Felicia Frank, I'll give it to you. She has 2 shutouts in as many games played. Incredibly impressive. I'm not taking anything away from Felicia Frank, but it's too little of a sample size, I think, to call her the best right now. Dylan Silverstein was impressive for the men's team, but that was only in 1 game. Doyle started 6 games. She's 4-2 in that stretch. Not to mention, she's had to make at least 20 saves in all but 1 game this year. She's got 3 shutouts, an impressive 1.19 goals against, a .949 save percentage. I think she's been the best because of the longevity she's had compared to the other goalies.
But if you're going just based on stats alone, Frank's save percentage is 1. Nothing else after that. .000. She's been perfect. Miss Perfect. That's who everyone at home that's watching, Miss Perfect. Anything else would just be unbelievable. I just can't. Miss Perfect is Felicia Frank.
Yeah, but to anyone watching at home, too, if you didn't catch the women's hockey game against Syracuse on Friday night that Mike and I had the pleasure to call together, and we were a lot more civil that night, too. Syracuse, I think, registered, if I'm correct here, 8 shots on goal, 9 shots on goal, or something along those lines? I mean, that's like 90s devil stats with Brodeur. The people call him not the best goalie of all time because of the trap system. But the save is a save, I understand that. But when you only have to stop 8 pucks in a night, as opposed to Kaylee Doyle, who has had to stop at least 20 in all but one game this year, I think that's a lot more
But
impressive.
she's had the losses, too. Frank has never lost a game yet.
Well, the losses
If
are
I
going
was
to come. The
Cass
more you play, you're going
To
to get
build
some
off the
losses.
last question, if I was Cass Turner, I would go forward with Frank. She hasn't lost a game yet. Go with the hot hand. Go with the goalie that hasn't lost a game yet.
I mean, I guess we'll see what Cass Turner does, but I'm just saying the more you play, of course you're going to accumulate losses. But
Not for Frank. Not for Frank. She's played 2 games and has 2 wins.
only 2 then, as
2 is
opposed
better.
to 6.
I would rather have 2 wins in the 2 games I started than playing as many games as Doyle has and have the losses. I would want a perfect record.
But would you rather have-
Wouldn't you want a perfect record, an undefeated season?
Well, of course I would, but I would also want 3 shutouts as opposed to 2 if I had the choice.
But if it's 2 shutouts in 2 games and 2 wins, those are a lot better stats, Eric. Come on.
When you face the amount of shots that Kaylee Doyle's faced, though, I'd rather have that
But Frank
record.
still has the 2 shutouts. That means she's more perfect than Doyle.
I suppose.
Ready?
I still want Duncan.
Okay, but she had. So you're talking about how many saves that Doyle has made in a game. She has 20. Frank has 27 saves versus Northeastern, a team that Quinnipiac had some trouble with, but they ended up shutting the door. She shut the door. 23 saves versus Northeastern in that one. Unbelievably perfect from her. I just can't not use the word perfect when it comes to Felicia Frank.
I can see that.
All right. Well, let's stick actually with the women's ice hockey team. But now we're going to switch to the offensive side of the puck. Okay? So Maya Labatt has scored 8 goals this season and is currently tied for most goals scored across the entire nation. She's also the team leader in points. Do you think she can keep up her offensive presence? Eric, what's your opinion on the matter?
I think she can. I think she can absolutely keep the offensive presence up. I mean, she's currently at a goal per game pace, which, albeit, is probably pretty unsustainable. But she's already up to 10 points on the year in just 8 games, and she's on pace to crush her career high of 31 in 39 games. Despite the turnover, she still shares a top 6 spot with mostly women that she's played in for at least a full season already. So as a senior now, she's got 3 full years under her belt as a Bobcat. I think she's ready to take that next leap.
No, you can't. If you're looking at her stats, especially from last year, again, through January 26th through February 10th, she went on a 5-game goalless streak. Her last goal at that time, January 20th. I think, as one of my favorite bands, Foreigner, one of their hit songs, Cold as Ice, I think eventually she's going to cool down. She maybe will get a goal every now and then, but one person can't do it all. She's no Wayne Gretzky. They have so much other supporting characters that will help her out that I don't think that she can keep the offensive presence up. I think that there's going to be a lot more players around her that will help with that load.
Well, of course, no one's Wayne Gretzky. I'm not arguing there. And I do agree that listen, she might decline a little bit. But listen, I thrive on enthusiasm. I want to be positive here. And I think that this is a start to the season that we haven't seen yet from Maya Labatt. She has taken her game to the next level this season in Hamden, and she is not showing any signs of slowing down. She had a hat trick over the weekend. That's not any sign of someone who's going to be, hitting a rut anytime soon. She is going to be full throttle, pedal to the metal. Yeah, every player goes through slumps every now and again.
She went through she went through 7 different slumps last year.
Last year.
7 different slumps.
That was last year.
And that was when Quinnipiac, again, was talked about being such a good team, relying on Maya Labatt last year. 7 times she went through a couple of games without a goal, without an assist. Nothing. 7 different times, back to back, without a point.
You're forgetting an important piece here. She was also hurt last year, which you can't really produce if you're hurt too much, And then I guess you could make the argument, okay, maybe she's not a durable player. Maybe she's not, capable of being in the lineup every day. But she's never had a year where she started this hot, 10 points, like I said, in just 8 games. I don't think that she's going to be slowing down, at least anytime soon.
But as you know, there's so many games played in hockey, especially in the NCAA schedule. Last year, she finished her regular season on a 3-game pointless streak. And let me ask you, did they win the NCAA championship last year?
They did not.
Did they? Well, if Maya Labatt showed up just a little bit and tried to break that 3-game pointless streak at the end of the season, could have won a national championship.
You're also forgetting, again, that she was hurt. Who knows? She could have been playing with lingering effects from that injury. You never know what someone's dealing with until usually the end of the season they release that, and I don't even know if, I don't even know if they did. So,
I truly just think she's gotten too cold, especially when the team is starting to rely on her, that I just can't see her keeping up this offensive production. I simply just can't, especially with the roster turnover they had so far this season. I simply can't at all.
I guess we'll agree to disagree on this one.
I guess so.
All right. Well, it's time to take our first commercial break of the night. When we return, our analysts will discuss their favorite games from the weekend. We'll be right back in 90 seconds.
I tell my son, I love you every single day. Now, my dad has never said that to me. Not because he doesn't love me, but because culturally it wasn't comfortable for him. Now that he's a grandfather, he says, I love you to my son every time he sees him. My advice to all the fathers out there, forget the cultural restrictions. They grow up way too fast for you to waste even a single precious moment.
You know you don't have to wear your PT gear anymore, right?
It's comfortable.
So how's civilian life treating you?
It's fine.
When I got out, I didn't want to admit that there was anything wrong because I felt like a failure. And then I realized, like, there's nothing to be ashamed of. So I started talking to someone. Maybe you are fine, but if you're not, it's okay.
Thank you.
If you or a veteran you know needs support, don't wait. Reach out. Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Welcome back to Bobcat Breakdown. Gentlemen, we've had some great debates so far tonight. Next up, we're going to take a look at some of the top games from this weekend. Each of you are going to take turns listing your top 3 games from this action-packed past weekend. Mike, let's start with you.
You know what? Starting at number 3, Eric, I got to go with women's rugby. And I'll tell you why. It was only their first loss of the regular season. How many games have they played so far? And finally, they're losing. Not finally in a positive, but it's taken them so long to finally lose a game. And their lowest scoring game of the season was when they scored 10 or less points versus Dartmouth. Last season, it took them last season to finally match the total. It's got to be at my top 3, but only because that win streak was broken. And you know what? It still was a very competitive game.
Well, I certainly agree with you on some level, but I got to say for my number 3, I put the men's hockey game, the 2-1 loss on Friday night against Maine. Although it was a loss, I know no one likes a loss when you're rooting for the Bobcats, I understand that, but the game saw a whopping 13 total penalties. We saw the QU debut of Dylan Silverstein in goal, which I know is a touchy subject for you. I know we don't want to talk about him. That's okay, though.
Don't.
But we did see the debut of Silverstein, a potential, new goalie moving forward for the Bobcats, which is huge. And 2-1, I understand that, people love goals. People love to see goals. But real hockey fans also love a goalie duel. And that's what we had on Friday night against Maine. A real, just old school 2-1 regulation game, old school goalie duel.
All right, clocking in at number 2 for me, I got to go with women's volleyball versus Marist. You know why? That win, that sweep, it gives them that momentum going into Niagara, a team that they haven't been able to figure out lately. You see your score there, 3-1 was your final, and it was their third game, it was their third match, in 5 games where they completely beat their opponent downright. 2 of their last 5 are also on the road versus Canisius when you're looking ahead towards Niagara. It gives them so much momentum once they head up north. The chilly up north, I think this win will give them so much momentum going down the line to the end of the season.
I hear you, but now my number 2 is going to align with your number 3. I put the women's rugby game versus Army. And again, although I stuck another loss up there, 14-10 on Saturday, it was, for Army, they got out to an early 14-0 lead at the half. And then Quinnipiac almost came back. They scored twice in the second half of action. They cut the deficit to 14-10. may have been a little more exciting if they were able to actually tie it and take the lead and potentially win the game. But for QU's rugby team, they got handed their first loss of the year, right, in their 7th game. As you mentioned before, it took them 7 games to lose their first one. That's impressive, and that's always a big deal, when it takes you that long to lose, and it was a good game. And not too surprising against an Army team that has beaten Quinnipiac in the past.
Yep. And now, finally, clocking in at number 1, my top game of this past weekend, Saturday's game, men's hockey versus Maine. I mean, it was an opportunity, despite it being an opportunity to get them back to 500. It really set that battle. I know it's tough to start, especially when you lose. It's okay, I understand. From Marinov and Silverstein to really duke it out that weekend and finally get a clear starter, potentially who might move on. But it was just, as you said, you want to see a high-scoring game. 65 was the final in overtime. Was, despite the loss, an exciting game overall, and I think that has to be the number 1, especially from how many games there were that weekend.
Hallelujah. We agreed on something. My number 1 as well is the 6-5 loss on Saturday to Maine. Again, despite none of my choices being wins for the Bobcats, they were all tightly contested games that saw, great matchups across the board. This was no different. Who doesn't love goals? I just said who doesn't love a goalie duel?
Except if you're a goalie.
Except if you're a goalie, of course. And that's, we can talk about that. But, as a fan, you can love a goalie duel, which we got Friday, and you can love a goal fest, which we got on Saturday. 6-5 in overtime, and 5 different Bobcats got on the board, which is really impressive. I mean, that's something you can dig into on the side too. When you have 5 different goal scorers, helping you out, that's a sign for good things to come. For Quinnipiac, 11 total goals in the game, 3 power play goals, and 1 shorthanded. This game had everything.
Absolutely. That's why it might be one of their, even though they lost, one of their better games the entire season so far. I know it's only been a couple of games so far, 4 if you're including the game against Northeastern, but overall it really showed that, if you're talking about their offense, a lot of new faces coming in, that they really have that offensive power still, despite losing some of their NHL stars.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, I personally feel like the women's ice hockey game on Friday, their 4-0 win against the Orange was a really big game, not only for the Bobcats, but for Felicia Frank. I know you guys mentioned her earlier. She recorded her 2nd NCAA shutout this weekend, and the Bobcats thrived on offense early and played comfortably with that lead, dealing with the Orange in both games this weekend in dominant fashion. Now it's time for our 2nd commercial break of the night, but when we come back, we'll be talking about some of the shocking losses from this weekend. We'll be right back after this.
It's pre-diabetes, and it captures 1 in 3 adults. But you can escape. Take the 1-minute pre-diabetes risk test to know where you stand and prevent or delay type 2 diabetes. Be your own hero on smartphones everywhere at doihaveprediabetes.org. Even the mighty might not see it coming. It's pre-diabetes, and it captures 1 in 3 adults. But you can escape. Take the 1-minute pre-diabetes risk test to know where you stand and prevent or delay type 2 diabetes. Be your own hero on smartphones everywhere at doihaveprediabetes.org.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. What about those barbecues you plan in detail for your family? Or your daughter's first costume party? It was out of this world. The same way you plan each detail for those moments, start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Sign up for local weather and emergency alerts. Prepare an emergency kit and make a family communications plan. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make.
Welcome back to Bobcat Breakdown. If you're just joining us, I'm Jack Bergman, he's Mike Singer, and he's Eric Zank. Over the weekend, there were plenty of games on campus. Our partners at QBSN were out with their cameras taking photos. Let's take a look. Can you ask them if they... Thank you, QBSN. Now, let's get back into the debate. The women's soccer team lost their first MAAC game since October 15th in 2022. Will the loss create any concern on their chances to three-peat as MAAC champions? Eric, let's start with you.
No, I don't think it's going to cause any concern. I mean, there's a reason why they even have a chance at a three-peat. They know how to handle wins and losses, and they know how to move on from it. You know, the team has lost other times during the season, and just because they weren't against MAAC teams, that doesn't mean that this one has to make them worry. You know, not to mention last year, they tied against Manhattan at the end of the year, a fellow MAAC team, in the ultimate game of the regular season, right before the tournament started. Though not a loss, it also wasn't a win, and the team still went on, to take the MAAC tournament home.
Yeah, you know what, Eric? I guess we're starting off this block in an agreement. I also agree, why would you panic? I mean, especially when the last time they lost, like we were talking about, in the MAAC against Iona in October of 2022. I mean, nothing really to panic over. Like we said with rugby, it was one of their first losses. I mean, you're looking at it now. They've been absolutely great so far to start the season. And that one loss in the MAAC, you know, nothing to worry about. I wouldn't start, as we have it here, that red panic button that makes that noise. Absolutely not. I wouldn't panic at all. No reason to. Just cruise on to the next game. You can't win them all, so you just might as well look to the next game. I mean, that's sports. That's life. You can't win them all. Move on to the next game.
That was spot on, the buzzer noise, by the way.
Absolutely right.
But,
do you want me to do it again?
No.
No reason to panic. There's no reason to panic.
Let's move on to some rugby. So, as you know, women's soccer and rugby lost key games this weekend. Which loss will have more of an impact on these teams? Mike, what do you think?
I'm going to go with, I think rugby. It's going to impact them more because, like we mentioned before, they're going against Dartmouth is their next game. I mean, they're 2-8 all time against Dartmouth. You know, Eric, do you know the last time they beat Dartmouth was? Do you know the last time?
No,
and if you do, no, just think about it. If you do, I'll give you the win right now.
Hit me.
The last time that they beat Dartmouth, November 19th, 2017, at home, and they only won by 9 points, 29-20. It's been so long ago. They dropped their last 7 games against them. In those 7 games, 2 of them were home games, 5 of them were away. It's just, I truly think it impacts rugby more.
I see what you're saying. You do have a good point. I personally think the soccer loss is more impactful, just due to the unlikelihood of the result. Army West Point had won back-to-back trips to Hamden going into Saturday's game, so it wasn't a total shock to me that they were able to win again. You know, they lost 3 games last year and still made their division tournament, the QU rugby team, that is. And so I don't see this loss as a huge deal. Besides the fact that it was their first all year. The soccer team, on the other hand, they lost to a Mount St. Mary's squad that they'd only beaten the Bobcats twice in 15 tries, as you said. And Quinnipiac even had a winning record against Mount St. Mary on the road heading into Saturday at 3-2-2. So just based on the fact that the rugby team losing didn't come as a huge shock, you know, given their opponent, but the soccer team's surprising loss to a team that they were more than likely expected to beat, I think that makes the soccer team more impactful.
But why are you flip-flopping answers? Last question, don't panic, no reason to panic, but it impacts them more. I don't understand that at all.
Because there's still no reason to panic, but I'm just saying compared to the rugby loss.
But how does it impact them more? I don't understand that.
Just because of the unlikelihood of the result.
But if it's unlikely, and
especially
if you know that the loss against rugby, they're going up against a team they haven't been able to beat in a long time, why wouldn't that impact them more, granted the team? You know, they lost, it was one of their first losses against the team in a long time, for soccer that is, and last question, you're like, oh, no reason to panic, don't worry about it. But rugby, they lost against Dartmouth.
Because they're
going to lose. Or they might potentially, especially after that last loss they took.
I still stand by my answer. There's still no reason to panic. But the question was between the 2 games. So compared to the rugby loss, I just think the soccer one is more impactful to the team, given the likelihood of them winning and they didn't come away with a victory.
It's unbelievable. I just can't wrap my head around that one at all.
All right, well, it's now time for our final commercial break of the night. When we come back, we'll give our final roars. Don't go anywhere. Bobcat Breakdown, we'll be right back.
My name's Stacy, I'm 57, and I was adopted in 2020. One teen can come in and make you look at life in a whole different way.
You know, he's my father, so I look up to him a lot. If I can be 10% of the man he is, I'll be a happy person for sure.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org.
I'm an ex-drug dealer, and I'll be your sub today. Two milligrams of fentanyl can be lethal. A lethal dose is in here. Who gets it, I won't know.
It's cheap, it's potent, and it's profitable. The sad reality is, fentanyl is being mixed into everything now.
More kids should know.
Everyone has a ritual, that small thing to keep us focused.
A habit we never skip, to clear our minds and elevate our performance.
But what do you do to keep your head in the game? To drown out the self-doubt and support your mental health. Because being your best isn't just about taking care of your body.
It's about taking care of your mental health. Discover the resources that you need to keep your mind focused and your mental health a priority.
Welcome back to Bobcat Breakdown. It's time for our final roars. I'll start. Every team wants to win a championship. Quinnipiac's D1 teams all have high expectations for the season, and no one wants to go home empty-handed. This weekend, the Bobcats had a few key losses. Women's soccer dropped their first game of MAAC play to Mount St. Mary's. Rugby dropped their first game of the season to Army, and men's hockey got swept by Maine. All these teams have championship aspirations and want to win their respective conferences. After these losses, they need to focus on winning games now and winning championships later. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is a championship contender. It's important for these teams to focus on the now and work with what they have. There are amazing first years on all three of these teams. For men's ice hockey, during the second game against Maine, 5 of the 13 points were scored by first years. Layla Cox has been a key piece for this rugby team, and Clara Bankston has 2 goals and almost 800 minutes with the women's soccer team. These first years have tons of untapped potential that can be built upon. The coaches have all the building blocks they need to win championships this year. They just need to focus on the now, being consistent with their play, and constantly making small improvements as a team.
Well, the Quinnipiac men's ice hockey team has 14 new players this season, and with that comes a lot of adjustment, not only for those new faces in the coaching staff, but for the skaters who have already been here for over a full year. It's their job to make the transition as easy and seamless as possible for the new guys, and that also means a necessity to improve their own games. Although they've played just 3 games this year, there are a number of second-year Bobcats that have to step up and fill the leadership roles that were vacated by many departed players in the spring. New captain Travis Treelor has just 1 point in his first 3 games, while other second-year Bobcats Davis Pennington and Mason Marcellus have yet to tally a goal. Speaking of goals, sophomore goaltender Matej Marinov has surrendered 8 of them in just 2 games in which he has started. It goes without saying that the season is still young, and there's not much of a reason to worry about these players just yet, but at some point they need to step into a bigger role as the season goes on and they become further removed from their debut campaigns in Hamden. First-year players depend on that veteran presence on and off the ice from guys who have been there and done that to help guide them through their own rookie seasons. The chemistry will come with time, and the offense will too, but for now, it's the second-year players and beyond that need to lead the team through the season while the first years find their games.
When the fall rolls around, the university sees an influx of first years, some from the Northeast, some from different parts of the country, or from a completely different country entirely. But for the first years on campus that are athletes, in addition to being in a new place, they also have other challenges piled up against them. They have to travel from wherever their previous team was, all the way here to Connecticut. Then they have to learn an entirely new system and make new friends with a locker room full of strangers, all while maintaining grades and going to classes as full-time students. With the winter rolling around, hockey and basketball are revving up with new faces on the 4 teams. These are simply young athletes with tons of pressure against them. If your favorite team on campus is, say, the men's ice hockey team, and they drop 2 road games to start the season, don't worry, don't point fingers. These young adults who are learning how to be themselves are also trying to balance how to be the best athlete they can be. So in the words of Bob Marley and the Wailers, every little thing is going to be all right. Cut them some slack, and just as you did as a first year, they'll find their groove too. Just wait and see.
That's all the time we have tonight. Make sure to follow us on social media at Q30 Sports and tune into our shows at q30tv.com/watch. From the producers and everyone working hard behind the scenes, that will do it from Studio 125. See you next time, Bobcat Nation.